Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily as we are calling our readings through the Johnson edition of the 1,775 poems of Emily Dickinson. We have now finished with a set of introductory comments, and our assumptions are that at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, chats with Emily, that you will have already found our intro conversation. And now we're ready to pick this volume up and to go to work with it. It is a remarkably different poem from almost any other poem that you will find in Emily's collection. It is, I think, sometimes a misunderstood poem. A lot of people just see this as a throwaway set of lines. And much as I said about all of the poems in Whitman's Leaves of Grass, I don't think there's any throwaway lines in our study of Emily. There are going to be some that are more popular, some that are better known. But I'm hopeful that I can help right away for us to begin to unpack some of the, what I consider to be remarkable things that are happening in this little poem, Awake Ye Muses 9, written during that Valentine week, not just day, Valentine week of March 1850. Emily will turn 20 in that year in December on the 10th. So she's 19 when she actually writes this, and she will share it with a would-be pal, we might argue. Now, I find it interesting that Johnson's volume, and we're studying from that one, but Johnson's volume will begin with the word awake and end with the word me. There's going to be a lot of influence of the Emersonian and even the transcendental tradition in our study of Emily. Do you remember what Thoreau says? We must learn to awaken and keep ourselves awake, not by mechanical aids, but by an infinite expectation of the dawn that does not forsake us in our soundest sleep. I think that it's in the air, right? And a whole lot of this is because of Emerson. This notion of waking up. So right away we're going to have this word awake, and we'll have a bit to say about that. Again, this one is a poem that was given to Eldridge Bowden, who was her father's law partner, and he kept it for 40 years. But interestingly, apparently, he never moved on the invitation to the curly-haired girl. And I'll go ahead and dedicate this set of comments to my young granddaughter, Joey, who has curly hair. We have a style that we're going to study here that I find remarkable in a young girl. Now, many will see this as silly and kind of throwaway observations, but I don't think so. I think from a young age, as a poet, Emily was very much influenced, especially in the Homeric tradition. So we're going to see this iambic hexameter. You'll remember in our study of the Odyssey, for example, this hexameter is the epic tradition and the quest for the epic tradition. You'll find the rhythm here very similar to our study of Pope, the, of course, classic, almost Alexandrian types of couplets, the heroic couplets, as we'll see it, with a break, or as we know, a caesura right there in the middle. We're going to see interesting balance happening in this poem. Now, I want you to pay attention to the theme of unity out of opposites. We're going to think of our yin-yang idea, the Taoist notion. And we're going to find Emily as priest and prophet right away when we're messing around here with lots of biblical references happening from Adam and Eve to Christ. And I think there's probably more Milton here than anything else. I think Emily was heavily, heavily influenced by Milton, and I'll point it out even when we get to this bit about hair, as we'll get to it in a moment. I've already mentioned curly hair. Notice how the poem is laid out. It just looks radically different. I love this poem for so many reasons because it seems to almost set us up for what's coming with our study of Emily. Notice right away. Awake ye muses 9. By the way, I should point out that the word awake is going to be used in poem 542, I had no cause to be awake. And you could make the argument that much of Emily's poetry is to try to awaken, much like Thoreau had suggested in Walden. Awake ye muses 9, sing to me a strain divine. Unwind the solemn twine and tie my Valentine. Notice the first exclamation point happening right there in the second line. We're going to see them all the way through. And there's some people that dislike her use of the exclamation point. I love it. I love that she tries to bring a certain level of energy. Now, when we hit poem 605, just to prove to you the power of a single word, I love this word unwind. And the idea of the spider in 605. The spider holds a silver ball in unperceived hands, and dancing softly to himself has yarn or pearl. Unwinds, he plies from knot to knot, in unsubstantial trade, supplants our tapestries with his, and half the the period. An hour to rear supreme, his continents of light, then dangle from the housewife's broom, his boundaries forgot. This idea of unwinding is powerful. Notice the irony of solemn, and twine and twain will dance between each other here in a bit. Notice this idea of tying my Valentine. Now, some of you will say I'm reaching, but go back to our study at learnstrong.net. Go back to our study of the Odyssey, and you'll remember that I said one of the powerful motifs of the Odyssey is the weaving that will happen. The storytelling, of course, you have Penelope with her weaving to try to keep away the suitors. Notice the use of tie here, and I think that this is intentional with the invocation of the muse as well. And then the use of the word "oh." Over 100 or more times, Emily will use this word "oh." Oh, notice capital. Oh, the earth was made for lovers. Now, some of you are going to say, okay, there it is. That's the first great line of Emily Dickinson. And from here, I'm going to begin to write these down and not note them in my Johnson volume. I'm going to have so many of these, I'm going to smile all the way. For damsel and for hopeless swain, we think, of course, about Marlowe's passionate shepherd to his love, come live with me and be my love. And, of course, Raleigh's nymph's reply. I've given full lectures at Learn Strong if you want to follow that to ground. And hopeless swain, for sighing and gentle whispering, and unity made of twain. And this idea of unity is going to be central to this poem. All things do go according. Think about Chaucer's opening lines as he plays the same game of all of nature, so nature pricks them and they long to go on pilgrimage and all of that. All things do go according in earth or sea or air. God hath made nothing single but thee. Note the irony. This will be a poem written by a woman who later in her life will be solo, as she'll get to it in a second. Nothing single but thee in this world so fair. The bride and then the bridegroom. The two and then the one. And of course she's playing with the Adam and Eve motif here. Adam and Eve his consort. The moon and then the sun. Again, these ideas of the opposites. The life doth prove the precept. Again, Emily is poet, yes, but Emily is pedagogue or is teacher. Notice this philosopher, this quest for proof. The life doth prove the precept. Who obey shall happy be. You could make the argument that Scooby Snacks, although they are an illusion, obviously, Scooby Snacks are happy. She learned this, just like I think Whitman learned this, from his study and her study of the Declaration of Independence, the pursuit of happiness. Happy be. Who will not serve the sovereign be hanged on fatal tree? And of course, we're thinking now about Christ. So notice, from Adam and Eve to Christ shall bring the two ideas together. The high do seek the lowly, the great. Notice all this anaphoria will take us back to our talks with Walt, right, in our study of Whitman. The high, notice, do seek the lowly. The great do seek the small. None cannot find who seeketh on this telestial ball. And again, obviously, Matthew 7:7, knock and it shall be, seek and you shall find, would have been easy access for any of Emily's readers if this poem had been read widely, which it was not. None cannot find who seeketh on this terrestrial ball. The bee doth court the flower. Now, this is setting us up for so much of our study. Her ability to animate and to personalize and to personify nature is going to blow you all away. The bee doth court the flower his suit receives. And they make merry wedding, whose guests are 100 leaves. And of course, we'll have to smile to think that this is 1850 and 5 years later, Leaves of Grass will be published. Although to our knowledge, again, there's never been any kind of established contact between the two America's greatest poets. The wind doth woo the branches, they are one. Again, now we're back to trees, and we're going to see trees all the way through, just like we saw with Whitman, all the way through Emily. And the father fond, we'll have to talk about daddy and the whole daddy issues that Emily has. Here it's the father fond demandeth the maiden for his son. The storm doth walk the seashore. Her use of certain verbs that are powerful, like walk here. The storm doth walk the seashore, humming a mournful tune. The wave with eye so pensive looketh to see the moon. Their spirits meet together. Notice it's not bodies, it's spirits. They make them solemn vows. Notice it's line 2, solemn twine. Now it's solemn vows. No more he singeth mournfully, her sadness she doth lose. The worm doth woo the mortal. And obviously here we're thinking about marvels to his coy mistress, and we're going to get seas here in a little bit. And I think there's probably some of this very powerful Renaissance poetry, Shakespeare's sonnets that suggest wedding and all of that is happening here too. The womb doth woo the mortal, death claims a living bride. Night unto day is married, morn unto eventide. Again, hear the rhythms and notice the breaks in the middle. Earth is a merry damsel, in heaven a knight so true. Again, her use of the word so we'll pay attention to. And earth is quite coquettish, and beseemeth in vain to sue. Now, notice the shift, right? All of this, it seems, to get us ready for this. Now, to the application. Again, Emily is instructor, we might say. Now, to the application, to the reading of the roll. And this idea of the reading of the roll is obviously a Puritan, it's a Calvinist idea. It's the idea that there will be an accounting on some level. To bringing thee to justice. I think there's a lot of Plato in Emily Dickinson's stuff, and obviously Republic is all about what is justice and the idea of justice. You'll remember in 10:17 of Republic, the responsibility is with the chooser. God is justified and all of that question of theodicy. I think we're going to see a lot of that in Emily as well. And marshaling thy soul. Notice the first use of a word that's going to come up again and again in Dickinson. Thou art a human solo. Solo is an interesting word here, especially for a woman that's going to live much of her life as a recluse. A being cold and lone. Again, note the irony. Wilt have no kind companion. Thou reapest what thou hast sown. And obviously here she's referencing the Galatians 6:7-9. You reap what you sow. Hast never silent hours and minutes all too long. Again, serious irony given who Emily Dickinson will become later, much later after she writes this poem. And a deal of sad reflection and wailing instead of song. I love her use of the word wailing. The only other use of this word is on poem 1060. Let's just look at it for a second. Air has no residence, no neighbor, no ear, no door, no apprehension of another. Oh, happy air. Ethereal guest, at e'en an outcast pillow, essential host, and life's faint wailing in. Later than light thy consciousness accost me, till it depart persuading mine. This idea of wailing, and she asks, hast never silent hours and minutes all too long, and a deal of sad reflection and wailing instead of song? It's again a rhetorical question. And then, interestingly, the poem kind of shifts, and it's almost as if now she's speaking directly to young Bowden, and she says, there's Sarah and Eliza, and Emmeline so fair, and Harriet and Susan, and she with curling hair. Now, I mentioned this about hair. We said this in our study of Milton's Paradise Lost. I think that Emily learned a lot from Milton, and especially this idea about hair as being somehow representative. Now, when we pick up our Sewell, and I've said to you guys that I think it makes sense for you to pay attention to a good biographer, we're told in Sewell that the 6 comely maidens have been identified as Sarah Tracy, Eliza Coleman, Emmeline Kellogg, Harriet Morel, and Susan Gilbert, and Emily, the one with the curly hair, okay? And what's interesting is apparently young Bowden never acted on this suggestion that maybe he would pick her with the curling hair. Notice the exclamation point. Thine eyes are sadly blinded. Think about Milton and the poem on his blindness as we talk about it at Burnstrong. But yet thou mayest see 6 true and comely maidens sitting upon the tree. And again, think about the power of Milton and the tree in Genesis 3, right? Go back to our lectures there. Approach that tree with caution, do you think? Then up it boldly climb and seize the one thou lovest. Go back again and look at Marvel's coy mistress. Seize the one thou lovest, nor care for space or time. We'll think about, obviously, Heidegger. Think about poem number 79, Save Just a Little Space for Me. You can go run that one to ground. Then bear her to the greenwood and build for her a bower. Again, this is kind of that Miltonic imagery that we talked about in Paradise Lost. And give her what she asketh, jewel or bird or flower. It's fascinating to me that she starts with jewel and ends with flower. And bring the fife and trumpet and beat upon the drum and bid the world good morrow and go to glory home, exclamation point. By the way, glory and home are both 2 of her favorite words. Well, what are we going to do with a poem like this? I love this poem right from the beginning. I love the energy of this poem. What's going to be one of the possible messages here? Well, maybe that true happiness is to be found in love, ... or ... is it? Question mark. I'll leave it up to you to... We're going to read in her poetry to ask, to what degree is there actual happiness versus sadness? At 2b, I love the classic style. I love so much of Emily's roots are right here in this poem. I love word choice. One word, unwind. The way the poem even unwinds And the power, of course, of that unwinding through this poem. I love that. At 3, I mentioned the Odyssey and Milton's Paradise Lost. I mentioned, of course, Emerson and Thoreau. There's so many others. What is for you? The titles that come to mind here. Pope comes to mind. Rape of the Lock. You can run that one to ground in our comments about it. And then finally at 3B, how are we going to own a set of lines like this? How about this for a question? Do you prefer to be solo or with another on Valentine's Day? And then another question, why do you think that the young man that she sent this poem to never took her up on it? And what was that about? Was it her choice? Was it his choice? Was it their choice? Well, we're into it now, guys. On to poem number 2. There is Another Sky. A fascinating study right at the beginning. I'm hopeful that it will remain that way. Thank you.